Okay. I just came in. I've done an intervention in English, and now being in France, I would like to do this one in French. Okay. For those who don't speak French, I heard that there is simultaneous interpretation. I compliment all the people who is present here and the organizers of this session. Et maintenant en français. 6 mois après la présidence.
6 months after the Portuguese chair of the Council of the European Union, which included a very strong maritime dimension, I'm very happy to see that the French presidency is now focusing on the ocean with this One Ocean Summit. And there's a whole series of initiatives which will be continued throughout the next 6 months. So you already have my congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, blue investment is absolutely crucial for the ocean we need and the world we want. That was already evidenced in a series of forums, such as the Ocean Panel, and it will be the same in Lisbon at the United Nations General Conference that will be organized in Lisbon in June this year, together with Kenya, with a 2 years delay, but that's the way things are. On the one hand, Portugal significantly invested in producing high-quality science and research. And on the other hand, in the past few years, we tried to really set out the prerequisites for a true blue investment in Portugal. We have a strategy that will guide us to 2030, and Portugal will be a contributor that will be strongly involved in ocean governance based on science. We have a resilience national plan in which Portugal include a number of legal mechanisms to favor blue investment, including funding of inventions and prototypes that have a direct relationship to oceans. So we have a whole series of measures which are included in our national strategy for oceans. All these initiatives will clearly contribute to restoring ocean health. Portugal already developed what is called blue funds, i.e. a 100% national mechanism to develop ocean-related activities, technological and scientific research, and global maritime security and safety. These mechanisms will fund not only conventional industries, but also emerging industries that are related to blue economy and that may have a very strong scale-up potential. Also, with a view to promoting blue investment and with a view to mitigating potential risks in this sector, the Portuguese government set up the Blue Portugal Investment Fund. And that initiative will be supported by private funding to support Portuguese maritime industry. These support mechanisms aim at increasing the value of blue economy by promoting investing in the blue economy. This year, the sea economy in Portugal grew twice more than the general economy. Portugal is part of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy. This initiative is extremely relevant for oceans. because it is made up of a large diversity of countries. It includes all the ocean basins, and it represents more than 30% of the exclusive economic zones of the planet. During the Lisbon conference, there will be an event devoted specifically to blue economy, to blue sustainable economy. So I'll invite you to attend the conference in Lisbon in June so that we can all take concrete measures to protect oceans. Thank you very much, and see you in Lisbon, I hope. Meanwhile, we'll be here for another few days.
Thank you so much, Minister Santos. What a great pleasure to have you here, and I'm delighted to hear how crucial this is for Portugal. That you said that investment in the ocean is crucial to the ocean we want, and we're very much looking forward to joining you and others in Portugal at the end of June, as well as your co-hosts, Kenya, the government of Kenya, in Lisbon. And I'm sure he invites you all again to come to Lisbon at the end of June. I should also say I want to thank you again for your leadership on the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, and I appreciate you acting as the Sherpa for your Prime Minister again, so thank you. Before I get started, I just want to recognize we have another Minister of Transport from Congo-Brazzaville, Jean-Marc Tikaya, who's in attendance, and you're very welcome, sir. Nice to have you here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the One Ocean Summit's Invest in Blue session. So I think it's very exciting to see people in real life, in person, and not doing this over a Zoom call, but we do welcome those that are joining us online from around the world, and we're sorry that you couldn't be here with us, but we're making the best use of technology. So over the next hour and a half, we're going to hopefully keep pace. I've been a bit of a taskmaster to all of our colleagues here. To be brief, to be concise, I really am eager to get to the question and answer session with you all, so we have an opportunity to engage and hear a little bit more about, a little bit more informally about some of the panelists, and so they're all geared up for that. So we're going to explore the opportunities for public and private enterprises to invest and benefit from the ocean. You will see that investing in the ocean is good for people and it's good for the planet, where effective protection, sustainable production, and equitable prosperity can go hand in hand. And we hear firsthand from a range of experts and practitioners of their motivation for investing in the ocean and some of their experiences to date. So hopefully they will be able to reflect on some of that while we're here. This is the hope that here in Brest and those watching online will be inspired to join this growing movement, and it is growing and it's moving fast, and the momentum. And we've heard a lot over the last day or so, people mentioning adding the blue, adding the blue into your existing portfolios, investing in blue, backing blue, investing in the sustainable ocean economy, and on and on. So lots of interest and enthusiasm for this subject. And certainly for tomorrow, a big moment. We have a whole range of heads of state and government that are arriving in Brest tomorrow, and we want a clear message that is sent out of this session and indeed the conference that investing in a healthy ocean and transitioning to a sustainable ocean economy has a multitude of benefits: social, economic, and indeed environmental. So my name is Kristian Teleki. I'm the Global Director of the Ocean Program at the World Resource Institute, and I also have the great pleasure of leading the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy and the Friends of Ocean Action at the World Economic Forum. So at the moment, considering the scale of the challenge, and you've heard a lot about this in a range of different fora over the last day or so, and certainly in your daily lives, you're hearing about the scale of the challenge that 2/3 of the planet is facing, and it's growing on a daily basis. And what it benefits to the ocean. But the problem that we see it, and we've heard this again over the last day or so, it is woefully underinvested. And if you allow me perhaps to throw some numbers at you to kind of consider what we're talking about, the scale of what we mean here. A recent study, some of you may have seen this, that it was estimated that $175 billion is what is needed to implement SDG 14 until 2030. So that's $175 billion per year. Yet, SDG 14, prior to the pandemic, received just below $10 billion in total, falling way short of where we should be. When you look at this in a little bit more detail, and where does this funding coming from? What's less than 0.01% of SDG funding from development finance? It is less than 1% of SDG funding coming from philanthropy since 2016. And take a most recent example, COP26. I know many of you, were there watching online. 141 countries committed $19.2 billion to end deforestation. But there was very little attention given to the ocean. The UK government did a terrific job, and a number of governments, and getting an ocean day, good progress. Getting the ocean as part of the UNFCCC agenda, great progress. Let's make the most of it, but let's mobilize the capital that's really commensurate to the scale and challenge of the problem we face. So, and this surely is not a cost that we want to pass on to the next generation, and when it's likely in our power now to invest smartly. And we think about the cost, and some of them in estimates, and these are big numbers, but declining ocean health could cost the global economy more than $400 billion annually by 2050. And then we're excess of $2 trillion annually by 2100. So clearly investment now is smart by the time we get there. And when we think about this, I think there's been a common narrative where for all too long, we thought we had to choose between protecting the ocean and producing from it. We thought we had to choose between building coastal infrastructure to fuel our economy and conserving the mangroves that protect people, coastlines from storm surges. That we had to choose between feeding growing populations and preserving the unique biodiversity within the ocean. But ladies and gentlemen, we do not have to choose. It's well past time to stop thinking of the ocean as a victim of human activity. Instead, let's think of the ocean as our solution to some of the big existential challenges that are facing our world. Climate change, poverty, food security. You've heard a lot about these subjects, and it is well documented, and the science supports it. So surely we should be doing that. But there is good news. I want to talk about some of the good news before we get into some of the panel discussion. Some of the recent work that's been done by the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, the heads of state and government, looked at the potential health, social, economic, and environmental benefits for investment into the ocean economy. And the high-level panel found that for every $1 invested in a sustainable or healthy ocean action, you can expect $5 in return in benefits. A 5-to-1 return? I mean, where are you going to get that? And I think that represents a really smart investment. And so I think there are tremendous opportunities that certainly could be explored. We've seen big numbers that the annual contribution that the ocean makes to the global economy is in excess of $1.5 trillion annually. Healthy coral reefs, a great investment. They absorb 97% of the wave energy coming onshore from storm surges. And this has reduced the annual expected impact and damages from storms by more than $4 billion. Healthy coral reefs, we need them. Good for people, good for the planet. Globally, mangrove ecosystems reduce costs of flood damage by more than $65 billion annually and protect 15 million people from flooding. Mangrove forests sequester up to 10 times more carbon than terrestrial forests. Why wouldn't you want to invest in them? Tremendous investment and return on that investment, both that's good for people, planet, and the economy. And there are a number of principles that are already out there. I know some of the people in this room and the organizations have already signed up to the Sustainable Blue Economy Financing Principles. You want to know where to invest? Use these principles. They were developed by WWF, the European Investment Bank, the European Union, the World Resources Institute, and now working very closely with the UNEP-FI. It's a great resource. Lots of tools that are out there. And we're going to hear from some of our colleagues today, and I'm not going to steal their thunder, because they have some great, inspiring stories that will tell you why it's smart to invest in the ocean now. So, considerable opportunities for investing in the ocean that are going to regenerate and revitalize the ocean, but indeed there is an urgency. So, we have a very exciting panel ahead, but what I would like to do first is to welcome our co-chairs for this session. Ambassador Peter Thomson, who is the UN Secretary General Special Envoy for the Ocean. We're delighted to have Peter here in person. And we also have Mari Pangescu, who is the Managing Director. I think she's going to, can we have her on the screen just so she can wave and say hello? Who is the Managing Director of Development Policy and Partnerships at the World Bank, joining us as well. And she will come in at the end and say, there she is. Good morning, Mari. Thank you for joining us. She's going to be listening very intently and is going to offer some closing remarks. I had the great pleasure of working with Mari on the Ocean panel. She's the former co-chair of the expert group that generated a lot of the information and some of the statistics I quoted. So we're delighted to have you, Mari, and indeed welcome. And we'll come back to you towards the end of the session. So with that, great pleasure to introduce Ambassador Thomson to join here at the podium and hear from you. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Kristian. I'll just get a bit more exposure to my brand here, and then I'll take this mask off. So, ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all courtesies observed, and welcome here to this gathering. And congratulations to all of you who have managed to get here in person. And I'm sure you feel rewarded by the great welcome that we've got from the seaside city of Brest. And our thanks on behalf of all of you to Brest. And of course to La Belle France. And the bagpipes are starting just as I stand up. And to those of you who are beaming in through the ether, bienvenue. So why do we need to invest in a sustainable blue economy? The answer is simple. It is because the sustainable blue economy represents the future of humankind. Why do we need to hold workshops such as this to provoke positive change in that investment? Because the sustainable blue economy currently receives ridiculously low levels of private and public sector investment. And you heard some of those figures from Kristian just now. Ridiculous because if you need to build an ark, and we do, you need to start assembling the keel and the planking before the flood comes along. So it's time to invest. If that sounds like hyperbole to you, I'll expand on those opening remarks and what I have to say to you today. Firstly, let us recognize that while COP26 in Glasgow made significant advances, we are still on a very dangerous trajectory for our species. The imperative of not exceeding 1.5 degrees global warming becomes increasingly tenuous with every belch from a coal-fueled power plant. And with each passing year, without wholesale radical transformation of human consumption and production patterns in this critical decade, we're propelling our children and grandchildren towards fire, flood, and famine. And so why is the sustainable blue economy essential to humanity's future? Because the ocean's tides, its currents, its waves and winds can provide us with all the renewable energy that we need many times over. Because in the fast approaching post-antibiotic age, science points to the ocean's properties, 80% of which are still to be discovered, as the pharmaceutical frontier. Because the changing conditions for agriculture on land, in those changing conditions, sustainable aquatic foods will provide our future nutrition through new forms of food from ecologically farmed seas and coasts. It may even be that global warming will drive many of us to choose to live on and under the ocean rather than in overheated terrestrial settings. This aquatic future is as it should be on a planet which over 90% of the living space on this planet is in the ocean and in water. And so I say, from the decarbonization of shipping to the safeguarding of coastal cities and agriculture in the face of steadily rising sea levels, the time for transformational investment in the sustainable blue economy has arrived. And ladies and gentlemen, let me repeat. When I say that the sustainable blue economy receives ridiculously low levels of investment, as you'll hear in this workshop further, whether it's OECD figures or those of the WEF or the World Bank, our performance figures to date just bear out that ridiculous remark. In fact, SDG 14, as you've heard, is prominently spoken of as the most underfunded of all the SDGs. So we've got to change that statistic as if our futures depend on it, because they do. In response to the call for the climate finance needle to move decisively in the direction of the sustainable blue economy, positive change is observable. From the Green Climate Fund to the Global Environment Facility, from the Asian Development Bank to the World Bank, movement is afoot. But is it fast enough? And is the private sector moving as well? Well, answers to those questions will emerge from today's workshop. In building these answers, I ask you all to bear in mind that this is the first in a series of meetings over the next 5 months that have the capacity to move that finance needle in the direction of the sustainable blue economy. Expect further work on this subject at the Our Oceans Conference in Palau in April, and at the UN Conference in Lisbon, the ministers invited you all to. We will launch new investment vessels full of innovative commitments at the Sustainable Blue Economy Investment Forum, June 28th, in the adjoining city of Cascais to Lisbon. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the year to stop the decline of the ocean's health. UNEA 5 in Nairobi at the end of this month is the budding opportunity to commence the fight against plastic pollution. The CBD COP in Kunming, COP 15. That is the opening for a new target to protect 30% of the planet. Meanwhile, the BB&J conference in New York can deliver a robust international treaty for governance of the high seas. And at the WTO in Geneva, after 2 decades of negotiation, imagine, this is the year for the removal of harmful fisheries subsidies. Imagine that, 20 to 30 billion dollars of public funds going towards those harmful subsidies each year, mainly for the enjoyment of industrial fishing fleets. Imagine those funds being reallocated to positive investments in the sustainable blue economy. Coming from a coastal setting of a small island developing state in the Pacific, I can assure you that investable projects, big and small, exist in profusion, and that in the inherited knowledge of coastal people, we have rich expertise to incorporate and build with. So don't you ever believe it when people with the money tell you there are no projects out there for us to invest in. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I will not comment on the forms of investment required for the sustainable blue economy, as we have assembled here today a cast of speakers who are much better versed than me to speak on the subject. Suffice for me to say that in my observation, there will be no single magic bullet, and that we must open our minds to innovative, inclusive ways of doing business, of valuing partnerships and science, and respecting equity, north and south, east and west. I look forward to this afternoon witnessing the forging of new ideas that we can carry forward, and the opening of high ambition and inspiring outcomes from this Invest in Blue workshop. And thank you all for being here, especially the panelists.
Thank you so much, Peter. Time for transformational investment is now. Investable projects exist in profusion. Great messages, Peter. I think we really need to carry those out from here and into the Leader Summit tomorrow. We hope that you'll carry those forward on our behalf, attending tomorrow. As Peter and others mentioned, there is an important role for business, and we need the private sector to take the same approach to the ocean. And we need, the ocean is taking for climate change, with considerable investment, serious commitments to reducing impact, and constantly raising the level of ambition. And that really brings us to our first panel here, where we're really talking about the involvement of business, and not just businesses that are deriving their profits directly from the ocean, but those that are taking up the challenge, not because they have to, because they think it's important, and it's important to their business and those groups that they interact with on a daily basis. And really what we need to think about is that the ocean is everybody's business. So turning to our first panel, we'll have a first panel with a few round of introductions, or it's our first round of presentations. And then we're going to move to a couple more speakers, another panel, and I'm hopeful that we'll then move very quickly into some questions and answers so we have an opportunity to engage with the audience. So turning to our first panel, we have Philippe Guy, who is the Director of International Business Development for the Fondation de la Mer. Philippe, if you just want to Yes, yeah, hello, there he is. On the line, I believe we have Marie-Claire Daveu, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Kering. If we maybe could just see her on the screen briefly. And then also joining us via video is Whitney Johnston, who's the Director of Ocean Sustainability at Salesforce, also joining us. If they may not join us now, they will certainly join us in a moment when we go to them. But perhaps before I go to Philippe, I don't know, I'm delighted to see that we have Sabine here with us, Roux de Bézieux, who is the president of the Fondation de la Mer. I don't know, Sabine, if you'd like to maybe just say just a few words before I hand to Philippe.
Thank you, Kristian. I've been in business for 30 years. I own companies and I manage companies. But most of my time I spent leading the Fondation de la Mer. You wonder why? I guess like everyone in this room and on screen, I'm convinced sincerely that the ocean needs strong and urgent commitment from everyone. Every citizen, every country, every NGO and foundation, every company, every finance organization. And this is the DNA of Fondation de la Mer. Getting everyone, every energy, every talent, every euro and dollar committed for a sustainable ocean. We've heard a number of very inspiring ministers. We've heard NGO and foundations. We've heard scientists, sailors. But we haven't heard many company business heads and even less finance organizations. And this is what this workshop is about today. This is a pity because as Brune Poisson from Accor, the leading hospitality group, said yesterday, every company needs to step up its commitment towards the ocean now. It's a pity also because when you think about the sheer power of finance, you wonder why these amounts haven't been invested in what matters the most for the future of humanity, the ocean. Assets under management, they represent $400 trillion, $400 trillion. Think about how much impact that money could have if properly directed to save our precious ocean. Finance has also a lot of power. You remember last year, a small hedge fund managed to get 2 board members on the board of Exxon on climate issues. Companies also have a lot of power. You know, we are finalizing, hopefully, this big pandemic crisis. And who has found the vaccines? No public research institution. Biotech companies from different countries, working with very large, big pharma, pharmaceutical companies. And that's where innovation came from, to save millions of lives. And that's where innovation will also come from business. Finally, final remark. Sustainable blue ocean, blue economy, whatever you call it, doesn't necessarily mean destructing the ocean. It has immense potential. Decarbonation means a lot of business. Creating a new circular economy could create millions of jobs as well. So let's think about having a positive impact on the economy, leveraging business innovation, leveraging this $1 trillion of money ready to be invested in what matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sabine. Very important words that really every company needs to step up, just like we talked about in terms of climate. We need the commensurate effort that is there. So perhaps building on that, Philippe, may I come to you? I mean, you, in addition to your work with the Fondation de la Mer, I mean, you spent decades as a managing director at BCG, engaging with businesses, thinking about this on a daily basis, finance flow, revenue streams, et cetera. And I think from your perspective, you and I had a chance to get to know each other over these past weeks in organizing the session. And it struck me that you're bringing a fresh perspective into this. And I'd be very curious to hear from you, in terms of the private sector involvement, in the ocean, and where are we standing on this? We've heard of a lot of companies stepping up, but what more should we be doing, and what's missing from that, perhaps? Maybe you say a few words on that, please.
I'll cover that in a few minutes, but just to bounce back on what Sabine said, who does not have a phone? This is innovation. This is what Sabine was talking about when she was talking about, vaccines and COVID. innovation. When we were talking this morning or yesterday at the maritime transition, economy transition, was about new fuels and new technologies and new power systems. The funding and the infrastructure and the legal environment needs to come from regulation and governments. The true capacity to innovate will come from the private sector. And in fact, the perspective is not that dark. If we think about what happened in the last 2 years, the private sector has stepped up tremendously, in particular on climate. We've seen many companies leading the way. We've seen many companies investing more, creating more opportunities. And I think some people would say that the COP26 was maybe a mixed perspective, except with a stepping up of the private sector, which was to a large extent unexpected. One thing which is noticeable, and we will hear about it, is the drive and the energy of individual companies. We will hear from leaders here today. We heard yesterday in the tourism sector about some leaders like Accor and many others who are really taking the lead and stepping up. What's interesting also, and from my perspective at least, working as a consultant in my life, I've seen a lot of the power of competition that drives behavior in a fantastic way. Without competition, we would not have the new generations of many things. What is very interesting from my perspective, and I've never seen that to some extent, to such extent in the last 30 years, is the collaboration that is taking place. Coalitions of enterprises, alliances of enterprises that cover multiple sectors within a sector. And I'm sure, by the way, corporate lawyers must have been very active to make sure that these coalitions do not go beyond what is shareable. But there's been a lot of coalitions. I'll give you a couple of examples. The Fashion Pact, we will hear from Kering in a few minutes. The Fashion Pact has been set up and initiated by Kering a few years ago. Fashion Pact, draws about 200 brands, 60 companies, about 1/3 of the fashion industry. And they have a very ambitious agenda with near-term targets on climate, on biodiversity, on the ocean, on plastics in particular, and I'll come back to that. Another one which is very interesting, the OP2B, the One Planet Business for Biodiversity created by Emmanuel Faber when he was the CEO of Danone in 2019. It regroups everybody from the food industry, from Unilever to Nestle to Kraft to Danone, of course, and some distributors like Walmart as well. They are within an industry and across, again, in taking into account distribution, but also they have some upstream providers like Firmenich on flavors. They have an interesting ambition around regenerative medicine, reforestation, and things like that. Those vehicles are extremely important. They've stepped up, both individually and collectively. The last one I would like to mention, because this, when you talk about private enterprise, let's be very, very clear. We talk about private enterprises, and we talk about private finance. And we will have obviously a big section on that in a few minutes. About in 2019 and then back to 2021, there's been a lot of net zero financial services alliances, starting in 2019 with net zero asset owners and then asset managers, and then very recently, I'll give an example on that, the Net Zero International Banking Alliance. This is very interesting because this is obviously, again, something that is covering, at least for the Net Zero Banking Alliance, about 50% of the assets worldwide, from Mitsubishi in Japan to Morgan Stanley in the US, Standard Chartered, SSBC, etc. It's a funnel. In France, we talk about entonnoir when you pour wine. It's a funnel with extremely slippery slopes. So when you sign up, you have about 18 months to showcase the targets you're going to have to decarbonize your economy. And then you have to have targets that are reviewed by your peers and by yourself on a very, very regular basis. Interestingly, when it was designed for a 250 perspective. Now it's 225 and 230. Some of the first companies that have signed up in 2020 have to give their plans this year, and on moving forward. So platforms exist, both individual companies seeking leadership and business opportunity, as well as alliances, and just named a few. And this is actually very powerful. Now, if we move on to the oceans, well, I mean, no surprise, the private sector has not stepped up on the oceans in the same way as it has on climate and other topics. So if I talk about, for instance, these alliances I was just talking about, the One Planet Business for Biodiversity, is essentially about upstream, regenerative agriculture, et cetera, but it doesn't go forward in terms of the impact downstream, including to the oceans. If I look about the Net Zero Banking Alliance, it's all about the 9 sectors that are really emitting greenhouse gases. There is nothing about the oceans. So those platforms exist, they can be repurposed, and we'll talk about the potential to actually repurpose them moving forward. One aspect that is missing, maybe as part of the corporate world and the private world investment, is the lack of ability to measure their impact. We know that even on climate, many companies struggle with the ability to measure their impact, and we believe this is even more true in the sector, in the oceans. Fondation de la Mer has developed a tool. Could you show the slide, please, that you have upstairs? Yep. Yeah. So Fondation de la Mer has developed something that is a tool that helps companies basically measure their impact in terms of all the contributions to the oceans, as well as all the things that are being extracted from the oceans. It's difficult to see, but basically, essentially, the measurement is everything that counts. When we say counting your impact on the oceans allows you to account for your impact worldwide on everything, this is true. It covers plastics, it covers sulfurs, it covers the other emissions, it covers wastewater, it covers what you extract. So this is one tool, for instance, that is allowing companies to measure, and not only measure, but engage on a trajectory of improvement. We had yesterday Accor saying they were signing up for it in terms of the trajectory behind that. We had Ponant, which is a cruise ship company. Amundi has been a big user of that tool in terms of how they think about the investment that they make for the clients, and maybe Jean-Jacques, you will cover that in a manner. Obviously, it's very important that all of this gets aligned, but I think this is a tool. I think measuring is only one element, and there are many other things that need to be done, but this is certainly an important tool. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Excellent. Some very important points that both you and Sabine picked up on, and especially when you talk about this pre-competitive competition, but also competition, but collaboration. Working together on this is extremely important. And I recall at the beginning of the pandemic, we had Prime Minister Trudeau participate in a BB&J, so Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction event. And he said, can you imagine what we've done around developing a COVID vaccine, working together as a collective? What could we achieve if we had the same sort of approach on the collective on the ocean? Very wise words. Moving on, when we talk about the collective and working together, Marie-Claire, I think you're joining us. Daveu, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Kering. Very distinguished career in politics, business, and sustainability. And for those of you who are not familiar with Kering, it is a French-based multinational corporation specializing in luxury goods and owns luxury brands that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Gucci, Alexander McQueen, Yves Saint Laurent. And really, when you start looking and digging into what Kering is about, you find that sustainability really is in their DNA. And when you have 38,000 employees around the world with a revenue of 13.1 billion, that starts to get serious, and how serious they're taking sustainability. So Marie-Claire, thank you so much for joining us online here at the moment. And perhaps I could just pose to you, if you can, I mentioned this about sustainability and Kering's DNA. Love to hear why sustainability is really core at Kering's strategy. Marie-Claire.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, first, as you mentioned, François-Henri Pinault put many years ago sustainability at the heart of our strategy. And at Kering, driven by François-Henri Pinault's commitment, we have always been involved because we think that luxury and sustainability are one and the same. And for us, we make the link between what we implement on Earth, but also what is happening for the oceans. More than only an ethical necessity, we believe that it's a driver for innovation, and it's also a way to have leadership in business. So we decided 2 years ago to reduce our environmental footprint by 40% by 2025. And I'm very happy to say that we are on track with a reduction over 30% in our EPNL intensity since 2015. And as the previous speaker, we believe that the first step, the first stone to implement a sustainability strategy, it's linked with the fact that you are able to measure your environmental footprints. That's why we develop a specific tool called Environment, Profit and Loss Account. Another very concrete example, we are already net zero since 2019. We want also to transform 1 million hectares from conventional agriculture to regenerative agriculture. And I don't make the link to explain how it's important to reduce chemicals, products, fertilizer on Earth to avoid to have this kind of products in our oceans. We are also working with more than 120 startups to pilot alternative raw materials like how can I do laser in lab. And we are also pushing research for recycling and upcycling processes. We want really to be in concrete actions because we have the feeling that now, and it's great, more and more people are speaking about climate change, protection of oceans, biodiversity. But we think that when we listen to the scientific people on climate change, on biodiversity, and on ocean, it's really the time to actions. And of course, all these actions are oriented to protect terrestrial ecosystems, but also the marine ecosystems and the ocean more globally.
Thank you, Marie-Claire. I mean, that's a good example of when we talk about ocean problems and the challenges facing the ocean that are very much land-based sources of those problems. So I think that's obviously very important to highlight. Marie-Claire, if I may come to you just briefly before I go to the next speaker. Philippe mentioned about the Fashion Pact. And maybe you just want to say just very briefly if we can, because we need to move on, but just in terms of that, the power of collective movement and so perhaps an ocean element that's emerging from that Fashion Pact. So briefly to you, please.
Of course. So the Fashion Pact, first thing, was created in 2019 under the umbrella of the G7. The Fashion Pact is the only CEO-led coalition in the fashion sector. We have a project focused on 3 pillars. First, climate. Secondly, biodiversity. And the last, really to protect oceans. And it's important to note that each project in each pillar has co-benefits to the other pillar. Specifically in the oceans pillar, the Fashion Pact aims at taking plastic pollution, chemical pollution, and microfibers leakage. Why? Because we have identified with scientific people that these issues are the most problematic with regards to our sector impacts. And we think that if we want really to change the paradigm, we have to act collectively. And we are also part of the OP2B coalition mentioned previously, and we have a lot of cross-fertilization between OP2B, the Fashion Pact, and also other coalitions that can exist in other sectors. For us, it's the only way to tackle this kind of issue. I hope I was enough quick.
That's absolutely perfect. Thank you so much for that. I think it's a really good example of how a company has started to connect the dots between what they're doing on land with the ocean. And I'm sure that's the case across a whole bunch of countries. And it gets back to the point and the refrain that the ocean is everybody's business. So again, thank you, Marie-Claire, for joining us. And please stay on the line. If we have time, we'll get to the questions. Thank you again. Thank you. Turning now to Salesforce and Whitney Johnston, who's the Director of Ocean Sustainability at Salesforce. You know, how unusual for a big tech company to hire a Director of Ocean Sustainability. So Whitney, to you, thank you so much for joining us so early in the morning where you are. But I'm always struck, you and I obviously have the great pleasure of working together, but I think what's unusual about Salesforce is this commitment to sustainability and ocean sustainability. how can you sort of say a little bit more about why other corporations should take this up and this challenge in really addressing the ocean, even if they're not directly related to the ocean? Whitney, over to you, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I first want to say thank you so much for having me here today. I'm so happy to be here. And I also want to thank everyone participating in this conference today for your leadership on ocean health, because there are just so many reasons to be investing in the ocean. And I think, Kristian, you outlined them so well. And one of the reasons that is central to our ocean sustainability strategy at Salesforce is that the ocean is the unsung hero in this climate emergency. And we recognize that the ocean really is impacting our well-being, employees' well-being, individuals' well-being, the well-being of the company and our customers. And so, like you said, the ocean is everyone's business, and we really recognize that here at Salesforce. And that's why we're investing in ocean health. And I want to share a little bit about what that looks like at Salesforce. My goal at Salesforce is to leverage the full power of the organization on behalf of ocean health. So that means my day-to-day job is to partner with philanthropy, with ventures, with our procurement team, with our government affairs team, even with our employees, our customers, and our suppliers. So that makes for a really good day, a really busy day. but that's what it looks like for us to really bring the full power of our organization to a really important initiative. And we invite others also to do the same. Like you said, Kristian, add the blue into their own business strategy. And one initiative that I want to talk about that I'm really excited about is our investments in blue carbon through our partnerships with procurement and with partnerships. So, okay, there's a little bit of a lag, so I'm just going to go ahead and carry on. So one of that investment essentially is a commitment that we made, a goal that we made back in November to procure 1 million tons of high quality blue carbon credits in the coming years. And the reason that we're investing in blue carbon, which is essentially ecosystems like mangroves and seagrass and salt marsh, is that these are powerhouses when it comes to sequestering carbon and protecting biodiversity and protecting communities and livelihoods. And so these are incredibly high value ecosystems to invest in. But it also happens that these projects in these particular ecosystems, they're really hard to bring to market. So there happens to be a divide or a gap between the demand and the supply. There's a high demand and a low supply. So to address this gap, we, Salesforce, are together with Netflix organizing a buyers alliance. And the intent of this work, this blue carbon bonds that we're forming, is to create a space where we can learn and act together at scale with confidence, with the ultimate goal of working with the suppliers and project developers to scale the supply and to drive more capital towards early stage projects. And ultimately also to ensure that there's equitable access to the market for local communities and that we're restoring these critical ecosystems. So this is an opportunity to get involved. And if you're investing in blue carbon or if you're purchasing blue carbon credits, then you can learn more about this initiative by visiting the Business Alliance for Scaling Climate Solutions website. And this alliance is the umbrella alliance where we are incubating this blue carbon buyers alliance. And then the second way to get involved is to join us in answering a really difficult question, which is, what is high quality blue carbon? And so we'd like to invest in high quality blue carbon, but we recognize that this year is a really important time for the community to come together to try and understand really what and characterize a definition for high quality. So Salesforce is planning to team up with some other leaders in this space in order to support a broad stakeholder process where we can all bring our heads together, bring our perspectives together, and create a shared definition. And so I invite others to join in that conversation this year and help us arrive at that shared understanding. And so those are the two ways to get involved with some of the activities that we're working on, the Business Alliance for Scaling Climate Solutions and the Buyers Alliance that's nested within that. And the second is to participate in this conversation around what is high quality blue carbon and what kind of principles or guidelines can we as buyers and investors and project developers follow to advance the market in blue carbon space.
Thank you so much. You heard about the Blue Carbon Buyers Alliance, the unsung hero. I know Salesforce has been spending a lot of effort looking into the blue as opposed to the stars, which some are looking at the moment. Partnerships, procurement, governance, employees, and customers. Words that I think resonate with all of you, and certainly ways at which we can engage a broader role. Delighted to welcome Karen Sack, Executive Director of the Ocean Risk and Resilience Alliance, doing terrific work. You've been working to drive investment into this space through development of locally financed products, which are attractive to business and government. I think it's exciting times, and Karen, we'd love to hear from you, please.
Thank you, Kristian. May I just say it is a pleasure to finally have a podium that is the right size. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to the organizers of this excellent summit for inviting us here today. We've heard a lot of facts, so I'm not going to go through any of them. Suffice it to say, and to emphasize what we heard earlier, that less than 1% of climate finance is invested into marine and coastal nature-based solutions, which is patently not enough. We've heard that by safeguarding reefs, mangroves, seagrasses, and salt marshes, we can protect the critical resilience buffers and biodiversity reservoirs that provide food, social, and economic security to billions. They're also incredibly cost-effective, as we heard from Kristian, and nature-positive investments. By aligning business and financial objectives with the protection of the ocean's natural assets, we'll be preventing today's coastal resources from becoming tomorrow's stranded assets. If we fail, it won't just be the ocean that'll suffer. It'll be the futures of the billions of people and their families who depend on it, as well as the retirement income, the investments, and the financial security of people all over the world. Because, as we have heard before again, the ocean is everybody's business. Every business has an interest and an imperative to act. And at the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, action is deliberately in our title. The diversity of our membership includes private sector institutions representing billions or trillions of dollars of assets under management, like our lead banking partner, Deutsche Bank, and our lead insurance partner, AXA. We have public sector leaders from the G7 to the Global South and civil society working from the ground up. This enables us to interlink policy, science, and business effectively and efficiently so that finance decisions can be made through a blue lens. And we are driving 3 leading-edge initiatives to dramatically increase investment into blue nature to secure the billions and trillions of dollars that are needed. First, through the Back Blue Finance Commitment. We are encouraging the finance sector to incorporate the ocean into climate finance decisions by committing to net zero, by endorsing the UN's Blue Economy Principles, and by joining ORRAA. Second, we're working with partners to construct a new global ocean finance architecture through the development of the Sea Change Impact Finance Facility, an enabling framework to drive billions of dollars into blue investment to really get to scale. And third, we're collaborating to build a pipeline of investable projects and products that provide proof of concept and drive capital into coastal and marine nature. We no longer have the luxury of being risk averse because our biggest risk is inaction. This moment requires business and finance to work together. So what can you do and how can you act? Invest in the development of the Sea Change Impact Finance Facility to seed this new ocean finance architecture, creating this marketplace. Work to create the policy enabling environment, develop the project pipeline, identify the opportunities for investment and build the products to operationalize it. Sign the Back Blue Finance Commitment. And you can also, of course, join ORRAA and put your institution's weight behind this movement. Now is the moment to create the step change in ocean finance that we need. It is time for a sea change. It is time to back blue. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Karen. Really exciting times for ORRAA, and encourage you all to either get involved or back blue. Absolutely, great call. Shifting gears slightly to some of the public institutions and the role of finance institutions as we lead into our second panel. I'm delighted to call upon Yannick Glémarec, who is the Executive Director of the Green Climate Fund. Yannick, I believe you're on the line coming in from Seoul. Are you there?
Yeah. Good afternoon and good evening from Seoul.
Fantastic. Delighted to have you with us. Yannick, I know that we've had the pleasure of speaking recently, and I know that the Green Climate Fund has been leading the way with considerable investments in climate and the green parts of the world. But Yannick, we're very keen to hear on perhaps what are some of the plans for the bluer parts of the world for the GCF. So if you wouldn't mind, some brief remarks from you would be very welcome. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the opportunity to address this workshop. A key achievement of the European Congress in Marseille last September and of COP26 in Glasgow last November was the fall of the walls between the climate change and ecosystem communities. From these events emerged a strong recognition that global warming, terrestrial and marine ecosystem degradation, and growing inequality are different dimensions of the same crisis. People-centered, ecosystem-based approaches are essential to avert catastrophic climate change and are a powerful tool to foster a more inclusive development paradigm. The ecosystem community can drive the design and implementation of successful ecosystem-based approaches. Conversely, the financial instruments developed by the climate community to de-risk climate investment and create green markets hold a considerable potential to catalyze public and private finance at scale to protect ecosystem. I would like to briefly describe a GCF initiative which epitomizes this new approach, the Global Fund for Coral Reef. It aims to both stem ocean heating emission and protect, restore, and sustainably develop the ocean economy. Coral reef ecosystems are critical in providing safety, food security, and livelihoods to more than 1 billion people. Coral reefs are among the world's most threatened ecosystems by climate change impacts. And drivers such as overfishing, agricultural runoff, or unsustainable tourism degrade the coral reef further, decreasing their chance of survival. Studies have shown that local management of such threats can alleviate the impacts of climate change on the coral reef, thus supporting and providing capital to businesses and companies for the sustainable use of ocean resources can considerably improve the resilience of reefs and the communities that depend on them. The $500 million Global Investment Fund for Coral Reef is a private equity fund to encourage investment in the blue economy. It targets 17 countries in Africa, the Asia Pacific, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Building on a public-private partnership structure initially developed to de-risk investment in renewable energy in 2018, GCF is providing $125 million of anchor and first loss equity to mobilize 3 times this amount in private equity from institutional investors. In turn, the fund will provide critical co-financing to entrepreneurs and mobilize a multiple of its investment in entrepreneurial equity and debt finance at the individual investment level. The GCF Investment Fund will benefit from synergies with a companion $150 million grant-based coral reef fund that will generate a strong deal flow of bankable projects. A successful implementation of this groundbreaking fund will create a new asset class to invest in blue. Thank you very much for your attention, and let me reassure you that the Green Climate Fund is here to back the blue.
Fantastic news, Yannick, and great to hear some of those numbers. You know, when I set out the tone, we were really lacking those sort of commitment, those numbers, and to see GCF mobilizing those resources is truly inspirational, and look forward to more, Yannick, and working with your team at GCF. So again, thank you for joining us late at night in Seoul. I want to turn now to probe more on the financial institutions and steering investments to positive impacts on the ocean. So maybe I'll turn to our next panel, and rather than introduce them one by one, I think I'm just going to jump right in if you'll indulge me. I want to turn first to Gilles Kleitz. You are the head of Natural Resources and Ecological Transition Department at AFD. We know that your boss, Rémi Riot, was going to be here, but unfortunately he's on a train. So thank you, sir, for stepping into the breach and putting you on the hot spot. I'm delighted to have AFD here. I mean, I think AFD is a great example of a public finance institution that is really stepping up on the ocean. And broadly, what is your message for the role of development banks for really stepping up on the ocean?
Thank you, Kristian, and thank you to the organizer for the invitation. I'll try to deliver my boss's key messages to this panel. What you're used to saying is that public development banks deliver 10 to 12% of yearly global investments. These bring not only a leverage for private investment, guidance, standards, norms, political signs, so they are absolutely fundamental. Are these investments, 10% of the world's global investment, are they aligned with climate issues, biodiversity issues, ocean issues? Are they climate neutral, nature positive? The answer is no. And the surprise comes that the principal shareholders of these finance institutions are the same governments that sign the Rio Conventions. So with Rémi, with my boss and our team, we've decided, well, it's time to bring all these public together and really get the job done and align this public finance for the economy, for the planet, for people, align with the Rio Conventions. So that's what we're trying to do. And we're doing that not as AFD, but really as a community of 530 public development banks, trying to align with the Paris Agreement, tomorrow align with the Kunming Agreement or the Global Biodiversity Framework, defining what it is to be nature positive, and defining in this nature positive what is ocean positive. At AFD, we commit about anything between 13 and 15 billion per year. In that, we have about 8% per year that is marine finance and coastal finance. These are eco harbors and ports. These are marine protected areas. This is maritime equipment for less impact on the ocean. This is sustainable fishing. This is blue carbon, just beginning, etc. So the key issue in this is really to justify stronger investment from all our colleagues around the world. Justify as well a convergence between biodiversity and climate co-benefits. And at AFD, we are 100% aligned with the Paris Agreement. And for example, in the ocean sector, 80% of our 600 or 700 million that we commit to the ocean yearly is climate positive, not neutral. Everything is neutral, but climate positive. 50% is biodiversity positive, i.e. restoring or preserving ecosystems. And about 50% to 55% really brings mutual co-benefits, not to mention, of course, social and so on. We can still do better, and that's why, on behalf of my CEO, I'm very happy to announce today that we have just signed the principles of financing sustainable blue economy. So we are joining the club and very happy to do so. And I think there are a few innovative fronts at the moment where public money and mostly concessional lending can play a key role in bringing together or at least contributing to the alliances that Karen was talking about and that so many of us have been praising and calling for. One of the key job of public development banks is infrastructure. Infrastructure, resilience, coastal adaptation. We have at least 1 billion or 2 billion people who live on the coast, and there is going to be need for public support, investment, public-private partnership, adaptation in the coming decades. How do we finance this? How do we ensure this? I think there is need for basically blending and private-public partnership in these associations to help cities like Jakarta, like others, to actually adapt. This is crucial. It's becoming urgent, and it's a matter of often of social crisis as well. Another key issue is ocean degradation-related risks. At the moment, you know, there's a strong push to better qualify biodiversity-related financial risk. We're directly involved in that, and I think this concerns the ocean directly, because we are taking huge financial risks by investing in activities that degrade the ocean, while at the same time depending from the good health of the ocean. How can we do that? And finally, as a conservationist, I'm not a finance person, as a conservationist, one of the key questions as well that is to be asked today, we are hopefully trying to establish the target of protecting 1/3 of the planet, 1/3 of the ocean. What is the financial and economic model behind that? And I think, you know, maritime business, fishing, etc., needs to provide part of the answer. There's some other key issues about governance, about practically how we're going to manage high seas. And I think this is as well an area where we need to bring minds together so we can find practical, bankable, and sustainable solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Gilles, lots of great sort of inspiration there from AFD for others to take forward. Ocean positive, very clear on that, thinking about protecting, producing, and prospering from the ocean, all hand in hand. You know, fantastic to have that leadership there. Paul Holthus, I turn to you, President and CEO of the World Ocean Council, known to many of you, I'm sure. Paul, you've been thinking a lot about this over the last couple of decades or more. Just perhaps reflecting on what you heard, are there some key lessons learned from your experience in engaging global business and that intersection between business and investment that you may be able to offer? Paul.
Sure, thanks Kristian. Really honored to be here and ringing this multi-decadal look at. I'm an ocean guy, growing up in and around the ocean in the Asia-Pacific region, and my whole life has been committed to ensuring we've got a healthy, productive ocean, turning over the years through various stages into focusing on the business and investment community. So at the World Ocean Council, we've created the global business and investment body that brings together the private sector, 35,000 plus stakeholders from the business and investment community. Thousands of those are investors, and this has been now underway for over a decade. And for example, Ambassador Thomson turned to us, as did the UN Global Compact in 2017. There was no global business organization for the ocean other than the World Ocean Council. So it's great to see the growth now in the interest from the private sector that really is really adding to what the movement we've been trying to create for 12 or 15 years. So what I've learned over that time is that there are a lot of good, smart people and good, smart companies that care about the ocean. They care about their ocean footprint. They want to do better. They need partners and collaboration in the sectors, across the sectors, and this has been a key part of what we've been doing, is bringing industries together across the sectors to think about this global ocean ecosystem and the global ocean business ecosystem, and linking in the investment community as a key partner then in providing the way for businesses to drive forward in understanding and addressing their impact on the ocean. Part of that also involves innovation then, and we have the Global Blue Economy Innovation Initiatives Network that brings together hundreds of incubators, accelerators, challenge competitions to try and create the coordination that we need to link innovation, investors, and the industries. And the key lesson here, Kristian, over the decades has been we need to be issue focused. We need to have investors and innovators looking at the market, i.e. the industries that have the impacts, need to make the changes. That's where action is needed. What are the issues? And I'll just mention a couple of those. Things like biofouling and invasive species. Not a high profile, sexy issue, but critical to the biodiversity, to the health of ecosystems, and the health of communities that depend on those coastal ecosystems. Another great example that's come up here already is the need to invest in and bring the industry connections to, as we heard from Salesforce, CO2 reduction. not only blue carbon, and we have a monthly roundtable of investors, we have a monthly roundtable on CO2 reduction and blue carbon, but also the ocean carbon sequestration far outstrips anything we can do on this planet in terms of nature-based solution is using the ocean, including coastal ecosystems, but even the open ocean more especially. That's where the scalable gigaton opportunities in carbon sequestration are. So let's focus on issues that brings together the market, the industries, with the innovators and where needed and appropriate, and especially then with the investment community, public and private. We've done that at the Sustainable Ocean Summit. Our focus in 2019, that has been at that annual event, the focus on investing in ocean futures is the most comprehensive investment and blue finance event to date. We've been waiting through the pandemic now to launch the Global Blue Finance Summit, which will start this year now that we're hopefully moving beyond the pandemic, to provide the annual gathering of the global blue finance community. So I invite everyone to get involved in that, public, private, blended, everything in between. This is the platform, this is the mechanism that brings together the global business and investment community for ocean sustainable development. So I'll leave it at that, Kristian, and really encourage people to get involved in these existing platforms that provide a way to operationalize our needs, our interests, our opportunities in a healthy ocean. Thanks.
I think really critical to capture those lessons learned and making sure that we're making the most of some of the successes and perhaps the failures that we've had on land, and thinking about how we can do better in the ocean and take it forward. And it's an exciting time for the ocean, as Paul articulated. When we talk about investment, I'd like to turn to Jean-Jacques Barres, who is the head of the Institutional and Corporate Clients Division of Amundi. For those of you not familiar with, Amundi is a French asset company with 1.8 trillion of assets under management at the end of 2021, and certainly is the largest asset manager in Europe and one of the 10 biggest investment managers in the world. Thank you so much for joining us, Jean-Jacques, today. I think in looking at those numbers, I'm certainly struck and curious, where does the ocean play a role in Amundi's broader ESG strategy? I'd be very curious if you maybe could say a few words about that, please.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be as blunt as my co-panelist, because he mentioned that at the moment the world of public agencies is not aligned with ocean strategies. I think it's even worse when it comes to the private financial sector at the moment. I think we need to acknowledge that. At the moment we are at the very early start to really try to integrate the challenge. And so if everybody in the world of private finance at the moment claims to be ESG native or to have ESG in its DNA, the truth is that I think we're just starting our journey into integrating the ocean question into what we do, just to be very clear on what we are. It doesn't mean that we cannot do anything. And I think here, as this panel is a call to action, I'd like to focus less on the call and maybe a little more on the actions. I think there are two types of things we can do on our side. The first thing that we can do is in the relationship we have with the companies we invest in. Because at the moment, and I'm very happy to discover that there are some companies that have an ocean director, but at the moment, if you take the MSCI world, meaning the community of the largest listed companies, at the moment, almost none of them has an ocean strategy. None of them, let's face it. So the very first thing we can do is to have a dialogue as a shareholder vis-à-vis these companies and ask them, what is the ocean strategy you put on the table? And this is exactly what we're trying to do. So modestly, we've tried to do that, engaging 10 companies last year, including one, Accor, yesterday, that announced that they are committed to put on the table an ocean strategy. And to do that, we use the tool that has been established by Fondation de la Mer, that was on the screen a few minutes ago, which is an impact reporting framework that we use to ask for this ocean strategy. So I think this is the very first thing we can do to use our influence as a shareholder. The second thing is the deployment of capital vis-à-vis some solutions. Here, I am an animal that is investing into listed companies, so not in the private markets that much. And we are going to launch our first fund devoted to sustainable ocean in June coming now, which has the ambition to really deploy capital within that spectrum. And that is a fund that will be distributed among the retail sector, which I think is absolutely crucial to make sure that we mobilize the finance at the level of the retail investor. So I think these are the types of action we can modestly do, facing the situation that at the moment, I think we're still very far away from what we should be doing.
Thank you so much for that, Jean-Jacques. I think you really highlight this sort of relationship with companies in the ocean, and I think, you know, with your customers, with your shareholders, your clients, I think it's a vast resource to, you know, to tap into. We certainly had Whitney talking about it from Salesforce's perspective as well. And I think there are some great tools out there. You know, we've got the Fondation de la Mer, your impact between companies and the ocean. I want to campaign to drop the S. It's the One Ocean Summit. It's all connected into one. It would be great if we could you know, make it one ocean, but also the sustainable blue economy financing principles as well. You know, there are a number of things and tools out there, so let's use those, and we have access to them. I mean, continue on the vein of finance and big banking institutions, Bank of America. N.Bronder, thank you so much for joining us. You're the Managing Director of Sustainable Finance at Bank of America, and we had the pleasure of sitting down before this session and speaking a little bit about some of your interests and where Bank of America is leaning. And I think, you know, you've had an opportunity to sort of hear what some of your colleagues have said on the panel. I think talking about partnerships, I'd love to hear from you, what do you think is needed for investing in blue and backing blue?
So thank you very much, and it's really a pleasure to be here in person with all of you in the panel and in the audience as well. So it is, as you said, the beginning of the conversation on blue finance. I think but it gives me great optimism if you look at the evolution on green finance. So we also started in green and climate finance not very far ahead, and look where we've grown. Now the market, the green, sustainability linked bond market is over $1 trillion. So we have a lot of interest from investors in looking at climate resilient investment opportunities. And we were challenged to not say from the finance sector that there's a lot of money and where are the projects. So I will also say that we're very actively involved in shaping projects. And part of shaping projects is also defining what they are, and this is where the partnership really comes in, because we can't, and actually I will say also, when we spoke about competition, this is an area where banks do cooperate. In the area of sustainable finance, there's quite a lot of cooperation between banks because we all need to have rules of the game. We create scale by creating markets that operate under such rules. And so defining what a blue investment is very important. We asked those questions earlier about green, and now we're asking them about blue. And development banks can play a very important role. IFC has come out with blue investment guidelines, which define commercial opportunities that support the oceans. And as was said actually in the ORRAA conference yesterday, what we really need to do is link the blue economy with the global economy, and to make all of us understand that there are business opportunities to being able to harvest the benefits of the ocean and what it can do for climate. So when those industries are even defined, they're defined as offshore wind, they're defined as fisheries, they're defined as really the heart of the economy that can be sustainably developed in order for it to generate positive returns for the environment. And so when we talk about the investor needs and when we talk about some of the demand for these kinds of investments, we do have to come back to talk about the verification process and the integrity of those benefits. And so this is where we, as well as others, are working with other standard setters like Verra and that will verify and certify that the credits that are really being generated are real and benefit the economy. And therefore, investors would then be very happy to come in and buy those credits and also invest in those instruments. And I will say from Bank of America, we've made our own $1.5 trillion commitment to sustainable finance by 2030. So this is very motivating by everyone. And our foundation has also supported nonprofits like the Nature Conservancy to develop blue bonds. And we've just seen a recent one from Belize, which is a very exciting structure. So I might just also challenge some of the governments and corporates that are in the room to think about issuing, perhaps from Portugal or France or Fiji, a blue bond that would really set some standards and point to those positive benefits that can be accrued from investing in the ocean. Thank you.
Great challenge there. Thank you so much for that, Liz. But before I turn to, I'm desperate to get to Olivier, and I'm conscious of time and things like that. But I do want to. We had a very interesting conversation about blue carbon, and that really is on everybody's lips here. Talking about it. And can I just ask you maybe just for like 30 seconds, 45 seconds on just like what are your top line thoughts on that? Because coming from a banking institution like that, can you just tell the audience a little, just really again, 30, 45 seconds on that, your top line thoughts on blue carbon?
So as companies and financial institutions make their 2030 net zero commitments, they cannot do that purely from their operations, at least not initially, and they must be able to offset the effects that they cannot mitigate, and they will do that through buying carbon credits. Now, so the market is ready and is ready to put money into this, and so this is where the generation then of the carbon credits from governments, from corporates, new benefits on carbon credits, the market is ready, and we are still trying to figure out collectively the price for carbon and how to make that market, but it's very important, I think, to realize that there is a buyer's market for carbon credits, and so there's a lot of motivation to try to develop those credits.
Great, thank you so much for that, Liz. I'm just curious. I'm going to take moderator's privilege here. Just bear with me, Olivier. Jean-Jacques, I saw you shaking your head. Do you want to? I want to take advantage and be a little provocative here, and if we may, just you want to just again really briefly, if you just sort of comment. I'm curious what you have to think about.
It's just I don't want to be contrarian. It's just I'm always a little skeptical about compensation when the mitigation efforts are done first. So this is why, just to give you an idea, that for instance at Amundi within the funds that we have, we never do compensation except if it is on a fund that is totally aligned, meaning, for instance, Paris-aligned benchmark. So otherwise, I'm a little skeptical about the benefits of compensation. That's all.
Great. No, good points. No, good. I mean, I think it's important that we think about these things and put them on the table. So I really appreciate you, and thank you for reacting. Excellent. Olivier Raybaud, Managing Director of Swen Capital Partners. Fantastic to have you here. I know that you've been involved thinking about blue for some time now, and perhaps you could maybe say this a little bit. I mean, innovation has been on the lips, again, is another word that I've heard a lot of people talking about, launching some innovation competitions. And I know you have some slides, because it would be great if you could have the first slide up here. Where are innovations, where are startups, or how can they contribute to around when we're talking about ocean health? So can you say a few words about that, please, Olivier?
Yes, thank you, Kristian. So I will share 3 examples of startups bringing some innovations that help regenerate ocean health at scale. So first, Unseen Labs. This is a French startup that developed sensors fitted on nanosatellites to track uncooperative vessels around the globe. And they bring a brand new set of data to fight against illegal fishing. Matter is an English design engineering startup, and they created an innovative filtering technology to capture microplastics at scale, starting with washing machines and to capture the microplastics that we washed out from our clothes. And Norway Seafood, that's a Spanish-Norwegian shrimp farming company, and they shrimp farm on land, they farm shrimps on land, within an innovative closed-loop system where water is fully reused, preventing the massive release of polluted effluents in the environment. By deciding how to allocate their assets, investors have the power to accelerate the growth of such impact-driven startups and to achieve both systemic impact and top-tier financial performance.
Maybe you could say just a little bit more. I know in terms of Swen Capital Partners, you have an investment strategy, that you've been targeting innovative solutions to regenerate the ocean. Do you want to say something about that as well? And maybe why don't you just go ahead and I'd love to hear about the 1,000 ocean startups as well, because that's something near and dear to the heart of the ocean panel.
Okay. So, do we have the slide?
We have the slide, please. Thank you.
So Swen Capital Partners launched the Blue Ocean Fund last September at the IUCN World Congress in scientific partnership with IFREMER to invest in solutions to the three main threats to our ocean: overfishing, marine pollution, and climate change. To deliver systemic impact, we choose to invest in highly profitable business models for two reasons. So one is by choosing startups demonstrating a clear alignment between their positive impact and their financial performance, we create a virtuous cycle in which profits fuel more impact. And second, by achieving high return on our investments, we will help channel an increasing flow of private funding towards impact investing. And this first fund was successfully launched thanks to the support of a few forward-looking, impact-driven investors, and in particular, thanks to Massif, a French mutual insurer, Groupe Arkea, whose head office is here in Brest, Builders Vision, which is an initiative backed by an American family office to develop the global finance ecosystem for ocean health, UMR, and BPI France, the French public bank. So you mentioned the 1,000 ocean startups. So maybe we go on the, yes, second slide, perfect. So the 1,000 ocean startups is a global coalition whose members pledged to join forces to scale at least 1,000 ocean startups by the end of the UN Ocean Decade. It brings together incubators, accelerators, competitions, and venture capital firms from across the globe. We are driven by our passion for the ocean and for tangible, large-scale, and rapid results. Together, we have already backed 168 startups to make seafood more sustainable, to stop plastic pollution, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from shipping, and to produce marine renewable energies. And we invite asset owners, public and private, to partner with the members of the 1,000 Ocean Startups Coalition to invest in their work and hereby to join us to scale by 2030 at least 1,000 critical solutions for the regeneration of ocean health. Thank you.
Fantastic. Really inspirational. Again, another great example of the power of the collective and working together in partnership, and perhaps putting some of our competition aside and really joining forces in order to move forward. So thank you so much for that, Olivier. Ladies and gentlemen, I want, if you just bear with me, I think I'd like to run over by 5 to 10 minutes, if that's okay. I think it's, we have an exciting speaker coming up right now with Bertrand Bardet, who's the CEO of Blue Orange Sustainable Capital. And I know I've had a preview of some of your remarks, and I thought they were invigorating and exciting, so we're looking forward to hearing from you. So, sir, the podium is yours.
Thank you. Well, I don't want to comment on the size of the podium this time. But thank you very much for managing the expectations. Thank you. No, it was an energizing moment in many respects. In fairness, I didn't know, maybe like most of you, what to expect from today's conversation. We all have admitted candidly that, I mean, this conversation was very new, and I must say it was ample time that we connect the dots between oceans and finance, that we put oceans at the forefront of finance. When we launched the One Planet Lab with President Macron 4 years ago, it was about climate, biodiversity, oceans, and finance. And in fairness, we did not really properly address the last part of the equation. And I'm glad that we put now oceans and finance together. Now is the time. And it's great to be here in Brest. It's a symbol to connect the dots between Seoul and San Francisco, here in Brest. I think nobody came here to enjoy another talk shop. We've done plenty of them. I've done plenty of them. We can't afford to have another line of talk shops for 20 years. I think action must be the name of the game. And it is up to all of us, not only on this panel, on stage, but in this room, to be up to the expectations. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to summarize everything which has been said today. It's about money, of course, and we've heard big figures. We've heard billions, we've heard trillions. And of course, we need this money. It's about business and finance, not in isolation. It's about doing not, again, what we have not been able to do so far. We have to be inventive. It's about discussing and accelerating regulation and normalization. It's not just about trailblazers and pioneers. It's about changing the system. It's about addressing the fiduciary duties of the people who manage your money. We have some on stage. So far, there is nothing which takes into account everything we've been discussing today. It's done on a voluntary basis. The virtue is not rewarded and the vice is not punished in today's system. We can discuss and agree on KPIs. We can discuss and agree on all the blue systems that have been discussed today, and it's great, and we need to foster this and to support this. I think it's absolutely essential. We can make the label Ocean Approved, chère Sabine, the focus of our thinking and action. And to be honest, I wish I could have invented this Ocean Approved label myself. But it's a label, and it's important to have labels. It can't be another label. It must become a routine way of thinking. It must become as natural as breathing. We have spent many, many years to structure the financial industries around valuing financial capital. This is at the heart of the risk-return equation we are all very familiar with. Now is the time to make this equation a little bit more complex, to value not only the financial capital, which is as abundant as ever today, but to focus on social and environmental capital, to focus on the capital provided to us by ocean, which has literally no value today. And that must change. Many initiatives have been mentioned. Together, I think they form the bricks of the sustainable finance construction that we need to build together. And kudos to all the speakers, kudos to all the organizations behind them, because they start the journey with us. There must be more to come, and there will be more to come. This is the price and the condition of scale, and without scale, there is no future. So let me try to go a little further. And to build our action, we need to build our action on firm grounds. Sorry, because of the ocean, you also need a little bit of firm grounds. We all know it's a crucial moment. How many times have we said it's a crucial moment? We know it. We must repeat it with conviction. Today, this summit will be, I hope, remembered as a turning point in a long journey, not as another summit. We know it is complex. We know it is complex. We know it can't be considered in isolation from climate, in isolation from biodiversity, in isolation from inequalities, etc. I mean, this complexity is at the heart of the One Planet Lab that I mentioned earlier. We need to combine the approach between climate, biodiversity, oceans, and finance. Complexity cannot be an excuse or a reason to continue procrastinating. Urgency, again, is the name of the game. It's time to accelerate. It's time to be serious, very serious. Technology and technical approaches are part of the solution, obviously, and a critical part. But they are not the solution. We need to push them, but we can't hide behind expected technologies. Now is a time of a revolution. I know French people like revolutions. They believe that everything will happen overnight. You abolish the privilege, you kill the Bastille, and then it's done. No, it's not working this way. It's a revolution that will take years. It's a revolution that started 20, 30 years ago with climate. We have to start it with ocean. And this revolution is a complex and difficult one, a challenging one. It must combine analysis and science, education of all actors, investors, consumers, workers. It means working on regulation. It's a pull and push effort. It's a combination of macro and micro, the most difficult. It's about innovating and scaling up. And it must be, it has been said by many, inclusive. It's not just the bobos of the world deciding for the rest of the world. It's not the hipsters in Brussels, Paris, New York, or London deciding for the rest of the world. It must be holistic. It's not the privilege of an exclusive crowd that we are here. And finance will be key, as always. I like to quote a great economist from the 16th century, Saint Therese of Avila from Spain. She said, "Money is a dung of evil, but an amazing manual." And we have to work on the manual. Finance is key. It's about new instruments. Some of them were presented today. It's about new rules, new regulation. All this must be, of course, ocean approved. I wrote a book 20 years ago with Michel Candessus, the former managing director of the IMF, on water. It was called Eau in French, E-A-U, and translated in different languages. We were both coming from the liquidity world, finance, not water. And the book started, Earth should have been called ocean, as it is blue like an orange. That's my commercial moment. And I like the word of the poet Paul Éluard. Our ocean is the heart of this orange. This ocean gives life to the orange, gives life and flavor to the fruit. Orange is a rich but fragile fruit. I think the poet shows a striking image. I hope this image will not only be striking, but sticking to our mind. And that's where it's time to give away two mantras that we have heard so many times. We can't do more of the same. And we cannot hide ourselves behind, oh, this has not been invented here. It can't work anymore. It cannot be business as usual. It's not about silos. It is about being cooperative and innovative, public, private, and civil society. And we have all recognized our weaknesses. But by joining weaknesses, maybe we can be a little stronger. And it must be done at the national, international level, but also at the local level. It's daunting. It's time to think out of the box. We all know that international law was established 413 years ago by a famous book called Mare Liberum from Grotius, the Dutch legal guy. I believe it's time today to raise the question whether freedom of circulation, freedom of the seas, is an obstacle to not consider the use of the sea. Is freedom of circulation synonymous with freedom of exploitation? Probably not. Is it probably time to discuss the pillars of our system? We are in Brest. Horizon is the name of the game. The dual tragedies of the horizons and the tragedy of the commons, which has been well identified with climate, cannot hit the oceans the same way. Talking of horizons, let me conclude while we are in Brest facing the Atlantic with a word from a French historian called Jean Favier in a great book written in the end of the 20th century called De l'or et des épices, of gold and spices. It's about the great discovery. He discusses the horizon. The horizon shows each of us the level and limits of our needs and abilities. There are horizons we accept and horizons that we cede. The one is sterile, the other exists. The other is only an idea, and it is fertile. Intelligence knows how to expand the circle. It receives a will to create, which could be called audacity, the spirit of enterprise. Thus, the horizon invents itself within the confines of need and ambition, meaning there are the horizon you accept and the one you push. And I think it's time now that we push the horizon, starting from Brest and going all over the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Bertrand. As I suspected, very inspirational and lots of food for thought. I loved your bricks of the financial construction in keeping with Peter's lumber of the arc. I think some important words there, and action, action, action is something we definitely want to take forward. I now want to turn swiftly to Washington, D.C., Mari Pangescu, who is the Managing Director of Development Policy and Partnerships at the World Bank. She's the former expert group and co-chair of the Ocean Panel. Also a very distinguished political career as the former Minister of Finance, former Minister of Trade for Indonesia. Mari, thank you so much for holding with us and staying in form there on the line, and delighted to have some closing remarks from you. Mari, over to you, please.
Thank you, Kristian. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody physically there as well as online. It's very hard to follow up that last remark from Bertrand to make inspiring concluding remarks, but I will do my best. I think first, what I have heard today has been very exciting and really very rich. And I think having been part of this conversation for the last few years, I think we have made a lot of progress on the narrative of ocean and the economy, with collective efforts from all of you in the public and private domain. And I think the main message still needs to be repeated, that we don't have to have a trade-off between protecting the ocean and benefiting from the ocean. I think many of you have mentioned this, and that healthy oceans does yield the triple benefits of climate, addressing food security, energy supply, creating jobs, and net economic benefits. There were lots of evidence put out today. And I just want to re-emphasize what Bertrand mentioned. This is a crucial moment. We have the evidence, we have growing analysis and evidence to support that triple benefit. It's a crucial moment, but it needs to be repeated with conviction. And I think this is really the task of all of us, to really go beyond the room today and emphasize it outside, so that you start having an influence on the urgency and the mainstreaming of ocean as a priority. Because I think Philippe, in fact, mentioned earlier that out of the priorities, even for private sector, ocean is not there. I'm happy to report that with World Bank, and I think you heard it also from AFD, we have already now changed our approach to see the interlinkages between people, planet, and economy, and it's green and blue, and inclusive and resilient development. So I think the move is there, the groundswell is there. We need to continue providing the analysis and the evidence, science-based, showcasing examples, so that we can really have this main ocean being prioritized and mainstream in the climate agenda. Secondly, I'm going to agree with Bertrand. I think we've achieved a lot there. We need to continue the narrative and the repeating it with conviction. Now it's the ocean and finance component and action component. So how do we get there? Question. And this is a part of the big conversation we're having, and we'll have to continue to have. I just want to emphasize two elements of that, the how to. First is managing the oceans has to be done holistically. And this is about an ocean strategy at the level of companies, at the level of governments. And the World Bank Group and many others have worked with countries to try to develop these kind of more comprehensive systems. And what does it really mean? It means that governments need to put the right policy incentives in place. They need to undertake the right reforms to be able to attract the right type of investment to come in. And it falls short of having to change systems. This is about integrating coastal and marine ecosystems, solid waste management, clean policy on the use of ocean resources, such as renewable energy policies, fisheries and subsidies, repurposing fisheries subsidies, clear policies for illegal fisheries, and so on. And also on issues on sustainable and coastal tourism. Of course, there's an international component, whether it's the WTO in the negotiations of the fishery subsidies, or the UN negotiations and discussions on the governance of high seas. There are many elements in the international component that's there. And I just want to also emphasize what Bertrand mentioned. The local level of governance and action is also very important. A second part of that holistic approach is you need an integrated approach that is important to de-risk investments in ocean economy and increase investor confidence. So if we want to scale up financing, we want to have a pipeline of projects, and we want to have innovations, you need to have that holistic framing of the policy framework and de-risking instruments such as defining the blue economy. I think the Bank of America mentioned, let's figure out, how do you define blue economy in the first place? How do you invest in strategic and holistic tools such as marine spatial planning, integrated coastal management, and marine protected area models? An agreement on standards of measurement, impact, benefits, verification, monitoring progress. Both Philippe and Elizabeth mentioned this. And I think this is really crucial, and this is going to be the work ahead of us. Second element, how to scale up financing and investment. We are facing this question not just in ocean economy, but also for climate in general. I think I just want to mention two aspects to this. I think there is an opportunity in the recovery effort that we can reset this notion of scaling up financing and investment. In the recovery efforts, we are focusing a lot on how can you achieve the triple benefit. So, for instance, restoration of seascapes and landscapes creates jobs, cash for work programs, improve the livelihoods in the future, and has a climate benefit. Just for example, in the last 2 years, the World Bank has provided funding for 100 million hectares of marine and coastal protected areas in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And we are providing a $400 million loan to Indonesia to restore mangroves. How does that link to the private sector? It's development banks can provide catalytic financing and platforms for private sector to come in. So in the case of Indonesia, not all of the mangroves are being restored with that 400 million. There will be other areas where private sector could come in. That's just as an example. With support of development partners, there's a Pro-Blue Multi-Donor Fund program, which also provides investment in blue economy. And finally, what all of you have mentioned, partnerships and between public and private stakeholders. We need to find innovative ways to help developing countries unlock financing at scale to invest in ocean action. And this can be de-risking instruments, such as actually having the policy framework and having clear measurements. That's part of the de-risking framework. And catalyzing to come in, to crowd in private sector to the platforms. Developing marine protected areas is one example where you can develop, there's government or concessional funding to develop the marine protected area development, but private sector can come in to use these as concessions. Many mentions of blue bonds, a very important instrument. The World Bank has supported countries like Seychelles to issue blue bonds, and I think this is going to be a continued important area of development. On blue carbon, my 2 cents worth is that this is a very complicated area, but it is certainly an area, if we are talking about the voluntary carbon markets from financial and other sectors that have this net zero commitment, we really need a lot of work to make sure that we are providing the right kind of measurements and creating the right kind of carbon markets. This is a very big debate ongoing, and I would say this should be a priority action for all of us to make that happen, to have the financing at scale happen. Because just to conclude with Bertrand's remark, without scale, there's no future. So let's get together, continue our concerted actions to convince and lead the conviction to action. Thank you very much, and I hope that I've been able to try to provide you with some inspiring concluding remarks. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful, Mari, as ever. A great summary and concluding remarks. Lots of ground to cover there. It's been a really rich, I think, discussion. Lots of great experiences. Thank you so much to our panelists, to our co-chairs, Peter and Mari, and to our hosts. I think this has been an excellent event. What I would say is 2 final remarks. One is I'd like to see, as we move along in the next conversation, whenever we get together, that we really are connecting the profusion of projects with the bounty of finance. It's clearly evident. It's there. You know, let's start making some of those connections. I think there is great fodder that's been launched here on the panel. You've heard it in some of your discussions, and I think there is a great more to do in this. And so let's move this along. And as we're leading into Lisbon and the UN Ocean Conference, with some of you that will be to attend the Our Ocean Conference as well, let's think about making those connections and really coming with some really good examples of investable, bankable projects that are de-risked, that are collaborative, with partnership, reaching out to your customer base, your shareholders, et cetera, et cetera. And as a good opportunity on the 28th in the afternoon of 28th of June in Lisbon with the Sustainable Blue Economy Investment Forum, will be a dedicated afternoon to really dig into this. We don't want to revisiting this conversation again. We want to move it along and really get some money behind those words and get it to those places where it's desperately needed and kind of really benefit people and the planet. So with that, I thank you for bearing with us. I think it's been a terrific afternoon, and I wish you a good day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.